Alrighty, a good evening, a good evening, a good evening. Welcome everyone. Tonight's edition of Monday Night Moshiach, where Moshiach matters. And we are going to delve into the teachings of Moshiach himself and see how we can live with Moshiach. So we are now in a double parsha. That's parshas Matos Umasai. They're combined. The sicha was given when it was first given 31 years ago. It was the same sequence as now. So they're both also combined again now, which is the case most of the years. And let's see how long it is. Not too bad. And let's get cracking. Hop right into it. Okay. The sicha was originally given on Beis Menachem Av, Tafshin Nun Aleph. Aleph. Ha'inyanim, ha'miuchadim, diyoim, Shabbos, Chodesh Zeh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyah b'dvareh. Shebo Mesiyamim Sefer B'Midbar. And we see the unique matter that falls out on this Shabbos. That is the completion of the fourth book of the Torah, Parshas B'Midbar, which we are going to be completing this Shabbos with God's help. Sefer Revi Yeshiva Torah, Shesiyoyma Mahaveh Gam Siyoyim Kol HaTorah. And not only is it the completion of the fourth book of the Torah, B'Midbar, it is considered a completion of the entire Torah. Why is that? Because it's known that there are 4 books in the Torah, and the 5th book, if you will, which is called the Sefer Hamishi, is the Mishnah Torah. Really, what's going on is it's a Shechazar V'Klol Dalet Sefarim Shlefanav. That is really a Moshe Rabbeinu, if you will, giving over and kind of recounting the first 4 books of the Torah. So the main completion, if you will, is in the end of this week's Parsha, and the end of the 4th book of Midbar. And then we enter into the 5th Devarim, which is literally the words that Moshe is giving over to us, and his, if you will, farewell speech. And we read and we say at the end of this week's Parsha, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, be strong and strengthen others. And this is indicative of the strengthening of the Yidden in all the matters of the Torah. And we say Chazak 3 times because it's referring to the completion of Chazak, which is a Chazaka. We know in Judaism, if something is repeated or occurs 3 times, it is called a Chazaka, meaning it's considered permanent. And it's showing the strength, the permanency of that matter. So we have to see the relevance to the completion of the 4th book of Torah as it's connected to this time. We always have the completion of the 4 books of the Torah during these 3 weeks, which are known as the weeks of narrowness, Bein HaMitzurim. But as we learned out from the Rebbe in last week's teaching, that is no longer really applicable, even though the halachas must be followed, because in the month of Tammuz, we had the redemption of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the beginning of the redemption of the Jewish people, Gimel Tammuz. These times, the Rebbe explains now, are already turned over to days of joy and simcha, and the focus is no longer on mourning of the past, but on instead focusing on the rebuilding of the future. And many times the Shabbos, many times the reading of this book, of the completion of the 4th book of the Torah, is not only during the 3 weeks, but it's also in the 9 days The lachor similarly hazman the gimel shavuos b'prati tes hayimim kasher im ma'amod matzav shel halishos b'kedusha hefech b'tachlis hazak hazak v'ditazeh. During this time, the 3 weeks and culminating into the 9 days, ordinarily that is considered a time of narrowness, as we said, a challenging time for the Jewish people. And it is usually considered a time of weakening in all matters of Kedusha, that it is not our highest point. And therefore, it seems to be the opposite of this idea of chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek, that be strong and strengthen others. Excuse me. So similarly, there's to say that since that this time is connected with the situation of weakening, if you will, this is emphasizing it even more the necessity to pronounce and proclaim that we need to be strong. But even more, it appears to say that the strengthening itself is connected with the specific time that we find ourselves. And this is emphasized in the name of the day of Shabbat. Shabbat Chazak. This is called Shabbat Chazak. Hainu. And every Shabbat that we finish the Torah and we say Chazak, Chazak, we need Chazek, is called Shabbat Chazak, a Shabbos of strengthening. Namely, Shabbat Zeh Hu Hechizuk the Masiyenu Resenu B'Kiyum Torah Mitzvos. And therefore, this Shabbat is a strengthening connected to our deeds and our service and fulfilling God's will through keeping Torah v'mitzvot. Alechem shalom dov. Base. Yuval b'hadam b'yur b'hakashir b'hashaychus tazak hazak v'nitchazech the teichen haparsha shabo misiyamim hasefer, parshas matos u'masai. שבזה נכלא חזק דמטס, וחזק למסע, וחזק שמיוחד דמטס מסע אחד. Okay. So first, we can understand this by seeing the connection and the relevance to chazak, chazak meaning chazek, to the content of the parsha, and the completion of the fourth book of the parsha with the fourth book of the Torah with the parsha Matos u'Masai. And this is including. So therefore, we have the strengthening of the book of Matos, we have the strengthening of Masai, and we have the strengthening of both of them together. The Indian Chazak b'prat gimel pa'amim chazak shayech leMatos. So the matter of strengthening chazak specifically that we say 3 times is relevant. We say to Matos because Mata. So matot is a staff. Mata is a staff. And staff is something that is indicative of something that is strong. It's not pliable. Pliable? You can't bend it. You can't change it. It's showing on something that's strong. And the example we see in a staff that it is something that is strong. And another definition of mata is literally means to rule, that one should rule, referring to a ruler that's in a higher place. Talking about the heads of the tribe ruling over the rest of the members in their tribes. So matot or matos, that parsha, which we're ending off the fourth book of the Torah with, which is the big, we're ending with Masay, but Matot is connected to together. So that second to last parsha of the book of the Torah seems to be in its essence connected to something strong. It can mean a staff, which is not bendable, which is very strong. It could mean the leader or the heads of a ruling over their tribes, which again showing the strength of the leader. On the other hand, Maseh, which is the final parsha, Shenina Halicha v'Nisiya, which is referring to the traveling or the journeys, but Makoim from place to place. She'eno oimer al Makoim, and you're not standing still in one place. Ela Chalek v'Nosa the Makom Achat. Rather, you're constantly traveling and going to new destinations. And therefore, the Rebbe says it's known when you're traveling from place to place, you have to completely readjust and set yourself up in the new place where you're going. Well, you should know. This seems to be the indicative of something that is the opposite of strength, right? Everyone knows when you travel, it wears you down. We just went to visit our son in sleepaway camp yesterday, Baruch Hashem, his first time going away. It was 10 years old, big experience for him and for us. And it was a 3.5-hour drive to Orlando, spend 2 hours, and come back after 3.5, and then come back 3.5 hours. So everyone's exhausted, right? When you travel, it doesn't strengthen you. When you're constantly going from place to place to place, it's the opposite. It has a weakening effect. And we see that the announcing of Hazak Hazak V'nit Chazeh is always after Parshas Maseh in the book of Midbar. Sometimes it's Maseh in and of itself, and sometimes it's Maseh connected to Matot. But either way, the final portion of the Torah is Maseh, and therefore it's indicative of this concept of traveling and weakening from traveling, which seems to be the opposite of something that is strong. Gimel. So let's start delving into explanations as to what's going on here. And Chazaka is connected to something that has 3, as we said earlier. It's a basic concept in Judaism. When you have 3 of something, or an occurrence that happens 3 times, it's considered permanent. Madgisha Chazak Chazak Teichav Gam b'Makom sheyesh meneged. Yedua Mispar Echad Ra'a Ma'or Matzav sheyesh v'Latchila Rak Teiv Kedusha. So the number 1 is indicative of something from the beginning that is just holiness. Like in the beginning, when God started the creation of the physical reality down here below with the Surah of Chesed. Chesed is kindness, it's giving. There's no opposition to it. It's in its very being just flowing of goodness. Mispar Shenim Mura'al Mitcholokais Begla Mitzyor Shahamineged. And when you count 2, when you introduce a second dimension, you have opposition. Like we see in the second day, Yom Sheni, which brought forth Gevora, which is the opposite of Chesed. Mispar Shalosh Mura'al Chayzek V'Teichav Tekudusha. But the number 3 brings together these 2 opposite realities. It causes a balancing, if you will, right? And they call it in the English vernacular thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. You have something that's presented, you have an opposite opinion, and then you have the idea of bringing these 2 opposite things together. And that's the power of 3. That the strengthening and power of the number 3 is now based on we see in 2 ways. Aleph, from the upper side. Hainu, and this is referring to the power and strength of drawing down the light or energy, if you will, of holiness. In all places, even places where there is an opposition. And this is emphasizing the power and strength of what is known as the light of Bli Gvul, meaning the light that comes from above, from God, if you will, has no boundaries and no limitations. It's infinite. It's one of the names of God is Ein Sof, or with no end, continually flowing. And the light that emanates from that is called Or Ein Sof, the light that continues and never ends. So that emphasizes the power of above without any boundaries or limitations. Then you have Beis Mitzad HaTachtoin from the lower parts, She'avoda Ha'iluyas HaTachtoin, which is the service of elevating the lowers. He ba'ifin she'choizek v'toich, v'tal haminek, v'sir mezeh l'hafcho kedusha. And this is indicating the strength and power of nullifying the opposition and transforming it to holiness. The base of finding Edom, Rumizim, Chazak, Parshas Matos, and Masai, and we see both of these realities coming into play with the combination of Parshas Matos and Masai. Chazak, Parshas Matos, Chazak, Yain. The strength in Parshas Matos, is the strength coming from above. Yudav Moshe Rashi Hamatos, and Hashem said to Moshe, speak to the heads of the tribes. This is a commandment directly from God. And this is referring to the power and strength of God, that his commandment is drawn down into a place even when there's opposition. It doesn't stand in the way of God's energy or light. Now we have the Chazak of Parshas Masai, the strength in which is connected to Parshas Masai. This is emphasizing the lower power. That these are the journeys of the Yidden that went out from Egypt. And this is referring to the power of the service of the Yidden throughout the years, from refining the lower worlds. Shulamarois, Hashinoyim, Choluki, Hadargais, Shabaprati, Masiyoid, Bidat Midbar, all the Fi'erach Ma'umara Matzar Hatachtaim, Nimsein Tamir Tanua, Shahalicha Nisua Mitzrayim. There's Israel. And there's a constant moving and flowing and changing of the Jewish people in our journeys out of Egypt up until the time when we arrive into Eretz Yisrael. And according to this, we could understand the relevance of the strengthening of Maseh specifically. That since the strengthening and power of the place that there's opposition, this emphasizes even more the refining of the lower part of reality. That this is not only the strengthening and power of the light of holiness that is drawn down and shining in every single place without considering the existence of the opposition. That's like the light comes from above. There's no reckoning. It just pours down on everything. But this light specifically that comes from below, referring to Maseret, he's as kois im amin neged livatel lekol lekol hafchu lekadusha. By dealing and working with the opposition, it doesn't just completely nullify it, but it transforms it into holiness. And the complete and the true completion of chazak, of strengthening, is when you unify together both of these powers. And we see that in the combination of Parshas Matos and Masai. Chazak, the Matos, yesh bo ma'alis or hakadusha shalamach bala. Amakivan shechayzik zehi metzara yain eno shach lemetzia shahatachtoin mineged. The power of Matos, which is drawing the energy from above to below, as we said before. We see the tremendous advantage of having such a high light of holiness that it has no consideration or reckoning with the opposite forces that are opposing it below. And then on the other hand, we have the strengthening of Maseh, Yesh Bo Hamayla, the Bitul, Mineged, אבל היועץ מצד התחתון שאין בו תוכף הבלתי מוגבל, עליון, זה במדינה הגבלה, שרק בו שינוי הפסק. And then we see the advantage of Masa, that is the advantage of elevating and the lower part. So the strength comes not from not having a reckoning or taking into account the lower reality, but taking the lower reality and rectifying it and elevating it in such a way that it gets transformed. And we see the ultimate strength in combining both of these things together. We see the power and the strength of drawing the light that comes down from above without any consideration for the lower reality. And then we have the power from lower, which allows the elevation from below and rectification and transforming. And the idea the Rebbe says is by combining both of these together, we can have the advantage of taking this very big light that we're drawing down into the world. And also the big light, it's two kinds of lights in Kabbalah and Chassidut. It's called Or Yashar or Choizer, the direct light and the returning light. So the direct light has this power that comes from above and can nullify everything below it. But the returning light is when we take that energy and we use it to take the things that are against that energy, against positivity, and transform them to good. And the idea is by both of these forces coming together, you have the ability to what is known as called build a dir batachtonim, a dwelling place for God, where the things that oppose God are transformed forever, and the holiness permeates into the actual surroundings of wherever we find ourselves. Okay, Dalit. And we see that the completion, even more than the number 3, is the number 4. And this is why we see that these two things come about, these two energies. So we have the energy from above, which is 1, the energy from below, which is 2, the unification of both of them, which is 3. And now we have the fact that it takes place in the 4th book of the Torah that we completed, Parshas Bamidbar. And that's number 4 that brings a completion to even the 3. Why is that? כלומר, אף שבחובר לאחד עם השנים, שני המעלה למטה, אוקיי? וכמקום נרגש בו חיבור של בייס כבין, ולכן שלמות אמיתיס דחוזק בתוכף היא ברביעי. דוגמה מיוחד בפני עצמו שאין לו המשך לאחד ושניהם. So we see that number 3, it has the power by combining 1 and 2 together. But the Rebbe says number 4 is even higher, because number 3 takes from 1 and takes from 2 and combines it. But number 4 wraps it all up together, and therefore not only is it combining the 1 and 2 through the energy of 3, it has an energy that is above all of them, because on one hand it's on 3 that's connecting 1 and 2, on the other hand it's dominating the whole thing without having to deal directly with 1 and 2, meaning it's a true completion in and of itself, without relevance, so to speak, to the lower levels of 1 and 2. And this causes the ultimate state of peace or dwelling, of conquering, if you will, as we learned in last week's Sikha, of overturning opposition. There are a big example of a chair. A chair with 4 legs is obviously a lot sturdier than a 3-legged chair. And this brings about true permanence. But of course, we got to keep going higher, right? So we're not going to be satisfied just with the 4 that's higher than the 3, that's higher than the 1 and the 2. Now we're going to move to, you guessed it, number 5. 5. And this week's Shabbos, we not only complete the 4th book of the Torah, but we start the 5th book of the Torah, Devarim, Deuteronomy, if you will, which is also my birthday parsha, in case you were interested. מתחילים לקרוא ספר חמישי שבתורה. ההספא יסתירה בשנה זו. וסיימה על ספר רביעי שבתורה היא בחודש מנחם אב. We see that the completion of the 4th book of the Torah is already taking place in the month of Menachem Av, Chodesh Chamishi, which is the 5th month, when we're counting from Nisan. I lost my place. Oh. Kiyudua Chamishi hu darga haki na'alish lamaila v'digva hadbala v'lamal v'sevi shtosus. Got the number 5 is a Moshiach number. It is connected to redemption. And it's connected to a level that is above any boundaries and limitations whatsoever, because it's above Seder Hishtalshelus. It's connected to the upper worlds, world of Keter and above Adam Kadmon, if you will. Because the lower worlds, they're still much higher. In Hishtalshelus, you have Etzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Those are the general 4 worlds that make up Seder Hishtalshelus, or the chain of creation that God employed to turn spirituality into physical. First, he turned nothingness into spirituality, and then spirituality into physicality. And therefore, we see 5 is above everything. And this is referring to Chamishis Lefaroi. Is Priyoi Vizgalin Mine Kol Nechorim. These very big, wild, uncontrollable lights of Tohu, if you will, that we learned about in Parshas Bo. And this is specifically through combining both lines of above and below. But Tachlis Shlem is in the ultimate complete way. Number 5. Yeah. Hey. Obviously, Yesh Lebora Kasher Ashaylos Chazak Chazak Mitchazek all Sefer Revis. So now we see also the connection to the 3 weeks. Bakdama, first of all. Shakavan, Batachis, Horban, Vahagolus, He all Manas Levo, the Hamaila Vahashlemos, the Benisha, the Rabbeinu Basin Lasid, Ugulasid. Keep losing my place, sorry. Oh, so the ultimate intention of the destruction of the temple and the exile was only to bring about the building and the completion of the 3rd temple, which will take place in the future to come. And this will bring about the ultimate completion of redemption, because it'll be the final redemption, and it'll be connected to the final temple, which will no longer be destroyed. So let's explain this a little bit. The advantage of the future temple is it is a building that will be established through God's hands himself. As we already said in the Song of Sea, Elu Zoicha Yisrael Kivan Ja'ala Parsot Ragalehem Min Hayam Hayo Niknasin La'aretz Va'az Yah Niknasin La'aretz V'yishrabu Nitzchi She'ein Argigos Ubinan Beis Hamikdash Nitzchi. It said, as it's known, if the Jewish people would have merited when we went out of Egypt and we went through the sea, we would have immediately went into Eretz Israel, and we would immediately had all the temples in one shot. Boom, the third temple would have descended, and we would not have an exile. Wouldn't that have been nice? יש לומר שמכיוון שכל ענייני התורה גם אמיתיים ונצחיים, כלל גם עניינים שחויבה בתור Saktin Winadan Elo Zaycha Yishne Gamata Engen Hagula Nitzchis Beis Hamikdash Nitzchi Boyfriend Shach Hazak Betech Ela Shachayzik Betech Shalehem Who Metzar Yoin Bulvat Loichin Ba'omo Shahatachta Yishne Metzar Shah Harban Vagalos. And therefore we see we see that was the destruction of the temple. Because even though there was a complete from the upper energy, there was not a completion from the lower energy, and therefore it got destroyed. Lo maspich choizek v'tayich v'gula be'inyan beis hamikdash mitzad hatakton bevad kiman shehatakton hu medor umubal. Choizek v'tayich shebo hu medina hagbala lo v'oifen nitzchi. ולכן יצריך החיבור בייס המד, חזק ותקל הגאולה לבניין בייס המקדש מצד היום מצד התחתיים גם יחד, שאז נצטרך הגאולה נצחית ובייס המקדש נצחית. We saw that the first temple was indicative of the energy from above, from God. The second temple was connected from the energy from us, from below. And both were incomplete. But the third base of Mikdash is going to be indicative of the completion of all that energy coming together, and that's why it will be eternal. Vav, and therefore we see the difference between the first two temples and the third temple. The first temple was built through Shlomo. That Shlomo HaMelech sat on the chair of God, the throne of God. And this is referring to the main power coming from above. In such a way of descending from above to below. And there was no connection so much to the lower reality, and therefore we had the ultimate destruction. And by Sheni, the second temple, meaning all the Olai was built through Ezra. And that was emphasizing the lower. And we see that the second temple was missing 5 things that the first one had, and was connected much lower to the lower reality than to the upper light of God. And the unique thing that we'll have in the third temple, this will bring together the unification of the upper and lower worlds. And therefore the strengthening and power will reach its state of ultimate completion. And that's why it will be an eternal temple and an eternal redemption. No more exile and no more destruction. ודגש יסר בכך שגאולה יסידה שנקרא לפעמים בשם גאולה רביעית, דרגה מיוחד בפני עצמם, שכיוון שאין לו גם משקל אחרי שניהם מוגש שיהיה למעלה מהגידירים, העליון ותחתון, לכן נעשה כל שאר החיבור לעליון ותחתון. In some places it's called the third redemption. In other places it's called the fourth redemption. And the fourth is showing that it's above even the lower first three. Either way, it's going to be an eternal redemption with no more exile should take place immediately. But the Indians at Mudgash B'Shabbos Chazak D'Sefer Rivi'i Shavimei Bein HaMitzri. And now we see the emphasis of Shabbos Chazak and the reading of the fourth book of the Torah that takes place during these 3 weeks. Sorry, my back is a little tight here. Oh, okay. Chazak mitchazek, by the announcing of be strong and strengthen others. The Shabbos Parshas Matos Masay Murumazes Chayzek Hazaka V'Meitamid Shlishi V'Gol Shlishis. This is emphasizing the third temple and the third redemption that is eternal. Shubo the Achre Rebeit Sheni Ayrichu based on Milas Shneim. And this is because it's going to have the advantage, as we said earlier, of the lower, the elevating of the lower, the drawing down of the upper, and both of them unifying together. And we see this in the example through the unification of Parshas Matos Masay. Chibur Zeh Hi Revi'i Ve'ad Gam Zeh Ikar Shai Zeh Mesiyamim B'Sefer Revi'i Mara'a Darga B'Fnei Atzmish L'Mara L'Gamri L'Hagidrim L'Yan V'Tachtain Sh'Al Yida Nasicha Be'Al Tachton L'Beitzim L'Sida Gula Sida. And then the Rebbe is just emphasizing again. We have we have Matos and Masai. We have which is above to below and below to above. Then we have the combining of them 3, and that we're completing the fourth book of the Torah. That's the fourth. That's completely over both of them. All indicative of eternal redemption. Okay, but Yesh Marha Prati, it's a blessing on thunder and lightning. I'm not talking to myself. Yes, Mama Shoprati Misparim Shaykhim, the base of Midrash Hasid, the Gula Sida, Murumazim, Gam, is Manjabal Karim, Bashus Patos Masek, Ramazim, Hazakazami Chazech, all Sefer Revi'i. The Gimel Hashavuis, Murumzas, Hamada, based on their Shlishi, Gula Shlishis. The fact that we're reading and learning this and finishing this book during the 3 weeks is indicative of the 3, which is the third base of Mikdash, and the fusing together of both of these, which gives us extra power. And of course, it's the beginning of the 3 weeks is in the 4th month, which is Tammuz, referring to the 4th Geula. And then we enter into the 5th month, which is Av, which is referring to the 5th Geula, or the final redemption. And this is also indicative of strengthening all the Torah and all the mitzvot. Including strengthening all of our deeds and our service throughout the times of the exile. Okay. Ches. So now there's going to be there's a little asterisk or star, which means that the Rebbe is about to change gears a little bit, and it's a different concept. It all ties together, but just a change in the concept. Ches. Ini noisef b'Shabbos hakashor im erev Shabbat mimei shetrach erev Shabbat yachol b'Shabbat. And know that there's a saying: whatever you eat on erev Shabbat, it also is giving you a foretaste of what you're going to be eating on the Sabbath or Shabbats. Shechol b'Rosh Chodesh Menachemav u'mufarash b'Kara b'Parshas Seinu v'Aharon HaKohen al Har HaHar Gimel v'Yomat Sham. B'chilus hamishi b'echad lechodesh. Yom ha'elula shel Aaron HaKohen. We also know that Rosh Chodesh Menachemav is the Yom Ha'elula, the Yortzeit, if you will, the day of the elevating of the soul of Aaron HaKohen. V'adama she'ened shi'im amita nifarash the Torah shebasuv. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Hu chidush lo mitzinu v'dugmasei v'kol Torah kulo. This is a unique thing in the whole Torah, in the whole written Torah. The only person that gives the exact day of their passing. We don't know, doesn't tell us the exact day that Moshe Rabbeinu passed in the Torah. I mean, we know from other places in the prophets. But the Chumash doesn't say the day of Moshe's passing. Doesn't mention the day of Avraham, Yitzchak, or Yitzchak's passing. Only Aaron HaKohen is the specific one who had the schus, the merits of having elucidated specifically and spoken about in the Chumash his exact day of passing, which is on Rosh Chodesh Menachemav. Mr. Ba the mark. So what's going on? It's known that on let me continue. We know on the day of one's passing, all of their good deeds, all the Torah, all of their service in this world is drawn down even higher and penetrates into this world even more. Test. That this is completely indicative also of the completion of his service. You see, another very unique thing. It's the day of Aaron's passing. It says the entire Jewish people wept and cried for him for 30 days. Didn't see that about a Moshe Rabbeinu. Makes you wonder, not God forbid saying anything that Moshe was lacking, but Moshe was the leader of our generation. Doesn't say the day that he died in the Chumash. No mention of anyone mourning his death. But Aaron HaKohen specifically states that he passed on Rosh Chodesh Menachemav. And it also says that the entire Jewish people mourn his passing for 30 days. Men and women. It says Aaron HaKohen ran after peace. He loved peace and he pursued peace, as it says in the Mishnah. And he loved God's creations and brought them close to the Torah. You know that the passing of Aaron HaKohen, that the clouds of glory that protected the Jewish people, those are attributed to Aaron HaKohen throughout their journeys in the desert. Lemitis ha'arena amar yishma akanemi. Lamdecha shenisas araynu ashemua mistacha inyan kavod. Biur hakasha rahashakos the basin in Elam gashes with silva bamitis arayin gamar shlemus avoda yesh lamar hamad micharini hakavoy chehu habiskus arayin kamagami hamad hamayim. So the Rebbe says there's a specific advantage to the clouds of glory that are attributed to Aaron HaKohen over the man, which is attributed to Moshe Rabbeinu, and the water, the mayim, all things that were given to the Jewish people, which are attributed to Miriam. Throughout the desert, the water, the well of Miriam, it's called the well of Miriam, that Miriam, in her merit, the Jewish people had water. In the merit of Moshe, they had food from the man that came down. It was the merit of Aaron that they were protected by the clouds of glory that traveled and protected them from above. We see that the water and the man and the food from above are both connected to the Yidden and a portion else per person. Everyone got exactly what they needed. That right amount of water, right amount of food. Biduk. This is not the case with the clouds of glory. Hey, this is a makif. They surrounded all the Jewish people, the clouds, and it protected all the Jewish people equally. And this is indicative of this whole point of Achdus, of Aaron Cohen, that loved the Jewish people and pursued peace. And we see that reflected in the clouds of glory that covered and protected over all the Jewish people equally. And therefore it emphasized Achdus, oneness. Not that you get what you need and you get what you need. Everyone together under the same clouds. Yud. And there is, to add to this is hinted also in the name of Aroin. Aroin. Who in Ahava. Tuma Ha'alef. Mura or Sheyesh Bahava. So we see now is saying that this the concept of Aharoin is connected to Ahava, Aaron's name, but we have the source of Ahava, which is the Aleph before Har, is Aroin. Hold on, let me read through it, then I'll explain after. And this is referring to Pedeh, or wonder. Okay. So the Aleph of Aaron, we say, which is connected to the Har and the Nun, the rest of his name. So the Aleph is connected to Pedeh, or wondrous. We know that Aleph spelled backwards is Pedeh, or wonder. And this is referring to what we call as Ahava Rabbah, which is an abundant love. And this is the difference between Abraham Avinu and Aaron HaKohen. Both of them come from the right column, and their source is in the sphere of chesed, or love. But the attribute, the measurement of love and kindness that came from Abraham is connected to what we call Bedida V'Hagbala, boundary and limitations, based on the Seder Histalshlus, based on the chain of creation as it came down. Midas Chesed Ahava, the Aroin Seder Ahava, Rabba Shalmam Histalshlus. But the measurement of love that's connected to Aaron of Kohen is what we call Ahava Rabba, which is an abundant love, which is coming from the level as it is above the chain of creation, a level that is in its source a higher place. As Rosh Tevis Ahava, Resh Tevis Rabba, in Pshuta. Bro, Hamshaka, Mispashtus, Bechinas Ahava Rabba, Lamata. We see this is what it means that the Aaron said he loved peace and pursued peace and brought all of God's creations close to the Torah, because his source is from such a high level above that it had the ability to go much lower. Remember, the higher something is, the more it has the ability to go down and touch the lowest parts of creation, if you will. גם לבני ישראל שנמצאים בדרגת התחתונה, שהם בדוגמת אוסיוס התורה שלמטה מן השורה, ידוע שבאוסיוס התורה יש שני אופנים, למעלה מן השורה והשורה למטה מן השורה, דוגמת בני ישראל שנשאלו אוסיוס התורה, קדוש ישראל של כלל ושישי רגיש ושתיב ושישי שנה ויוס אוסיוס התורה. All right, basically referring to the fact that the Jewish people, all the letters of the Torah make up all the root souls of the Jewish people. And therefore, because he comes from such a high source, the ability to combine and unify the lowest of creations with God. Yurav. Patius Yoser, more specifically. Mudgas being Nisha Achal Rain Chibor Yachdus, Base Kivan, Hamshracha Ba'Allah. Mitzad Dargam Na'alish Yoser, Shalomar Mishalkus, the Alyan, the Tachtan. And we see that the emphasis of Aroy, which has the ability to unify and combine these two levels from above and below, and therefore he has the ability to bring about unity above any type of separation. The Ikrim, the Arana Kohen, who in Baracha as a Kohen, and the main thing we see in this is the blessing of the Kohen. Mitzvah Aseh Min HaTorah. Shibrachu HaKohenim Es Yisrael B'Kol Yoyim B'Shnias Kapayim. And we see that it's a mitzvah, it's a positive mitzvah of the Torah for the Kohanim to bless the Jewish people every day. And that's in Yerushalayim. I'm a Kohen when I lived in Jerusalem. And in Yerushalayim, you do Berachos Kohanim every day. Every single day. In Eretz Yisrael, you do it on Shabbos, every Shabbos. But outside of Eretz Yisrael, you do it on just on Yom Tovim, on Musaf. We see the advantage of the Kohanim blessing. It combines both tefillah and bracha together, a prayer and blessings. Excuse me. The advantage of a blessing, which draws down from above to below. And the advantage of prayer, which elevates from below to above. And therefore unifies them both together because its source is higher than both of them. And we see again this number 3, the ubiquitous number 3 that comes into play of the Kohen Bracha. And what is the Kohen Bracha called? A Bracha Mishaleshes, the Bracha of 3, because it has 3 stanzas to it. And it's also referring to the fact that it's the number 3, which is drawing down from above and combining the energies of the above and the below. Yishna b'moisei b'char ha'hor v'neitzef al hashleimos l'maya v'esrim shana komishana chayav shal Moshe shenamar bo hayom ha'lamayim v'shnoisai v'yir yama mea v'esrim shana chay oiv shalosh shanim v'mispar shalosh shanim v'mezaz close avodas ha'chibur beis kavina yirav v'shlosh. Okay, fine. Yud base. So we can see the connection, the relevance to the service of Aaron HaKohen on the day of his passing, which is on the 5th month of the first day of the month. Chodesh Chamishi, the 5th month. Keshur v'hashaychus the dargos Chamishi shalamarim histachus, v'misar b'seder histachus. Chamishis lefarei. These parim is gali mina kolari. The number 5 is a Menachem Av, is the 5th month of the year, is connected to this level of 5 that is completely above the chain of creation, and connected to these very, very high lights called the lights of Tohu that are above creation, that are too lofty, if you will, to come down in their own. And we also see the advantage of the first of the month. This is referring to the level of one that is above any division. And we see that's also this one day of Rosh Chodesh, connected to this unification, if you will, of all the other days together. There is to say, and therefore we see how the Torah is specifically written about the day of the passing of Aaron. In the 5th month on the first day. Referring to all the Torah that he did and all the good deeds he did throughout his whole life that are elevated and drawn down on that day. So, okay, we say the Rebbe is explaining how the fact that he was born on the first day, passed on the first day of the month, is showing oneness that is connected to all of his service of creating oneness. And also the 5th month is referring to this 5th level that is above any boundaries or limitations. And we see that both of these are showing on the service of Aaron HaKohen. There is to say, HaChodesh Hamishi ve'echad HaChodesh hu hakana, the clouds avodas da'ani l'dori v'dori. This is also a preparation for the upcoming month, next month of Elul, where we say, which is the Rosh Hashanah, of I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. The advantage of going from below to above. And drawing down from above to below. לצד נקודות האחדוס שלמעלה מתוכוס שאל ידע נעשה חברה בייס הקווים בפרט זה שבייס הדרגה זה אהבה למטה למעלה ולמעלה למטה אני לדורי ודורי ואוי לאחרי הקדמה והאהבה רבה שלמעלה מסתושלוס חסד והרי שבו הסתושלוס בחודש חמישי ואחד לחודש. So we see that this whole concept of this drawing down this oneness, this unity from the highest levels is a preparation for the month of Elul, where we have our marriage, if you will, with God. And we say, I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me, preparing us for the holy and awe-inspiring day of Rosh Hashanah. Now we have a little star, so there's a break in the concept again, and Yud Gimel. And now we have to bring all this into actual work. Because a Maisa U is the Ikra. The main thing is deed. Hamdeinu b'Shabbos Hazak this Sefer Revi'i. Shbo Metchil im Gam Sefer Chamishi. B'Prat Shechol b'Chodesh Hamishi. Shbo Mudgash Hoizek B'Teicha v'Beis HaMikdash Hasira Gula Mitzvah Hashem. That we see as we're standing on Shabbos Hazak, finishing up the 4th book of the Torah and beginning the 5th book of the Torah. And it's also in the beginning of the 5th month. And this emphasizes the strength and the power of the future temple that will last forever. Shehi Gula Hamish, referring to the 5th redemption. And showing the advantage of over the 1st and 2nd temples. Gula Rishon Vesheni. Tzricha Yos Hagasham Yichara Ben Noga the Nekudas Ha'aklu Shlomal Mishopos. So we have to bring into actuality, and we can learn from the ways of Aaron HaKohen. As it says in the Mishnah of Pirkei Avos. You should be like the students of Aaron, who loved peace, pursued peace, and loved God's creations and brought them close to his Torah. Magalim as Nakuras This is referring to the level of oneness, to the point of what we say is Achdus, that is above any division. Pratius Yoiser, and more specifically, Al Pi Hadiuk Lashana Mishnah Ava Matamidav Sha'arain Achat Rabbi Lashon Sivui. And it says Havui, it says you should be, the Rebbe says this is a commandment. That's a Lashon Sivui, like being commanded. She'en ze rak sipor al derek hanhaga b'midas chasidus. This is not only a story connected to the way we should conduct ourselves in a Hasidic way, but rather it's a commandment that we should be like the students of Aaron. Secondly, mitamidav daik, l'lashon rabim. It says mitamidav in the plural. Mitamidaisai b'kiyim amenhagasai shall Aaron b'yachad im Arabim. Shaizer in Taisef Bezet, Joyce Mitzar Hayinin, the Kanas Sufarim, but Tarab Hafma. Tarba, Daika Shirivoi, Amitis who believe Vo. Haino Lorak, wife and the Bakonga, Decha Baoid Shalcha, Ashlagad Havora, Marizam, Medina Habala. Erizab, wife and shall believe Vo, Gambali, Lagabi Havrav. Oid Shikashim believe Vo, Amitis. And the idea is that not only should we raise up many students of Aaron and as a commandment that we should do it, but it should be in abundance. Okay. And this also is emphasizing the connection to this concept of Ahavas Yisrael that will be complete in the future to come. It should be complete now, but we'll take what we can get. Not only because the galus will be nullified, and since we're already standing at the threshold because we've completed all our service and deeds in the times of the exile, and we've already completed the 42 journeys in the desert of the nations. And we've already crossed over the Yericho. Al Safagula, and we're standing at the threshold of redemption. And the Rebbe said, and for sure, we've already fixed up all the causes of the exile. In other words, there's nothing we could say that is lacking anymore for redemption to come. Hagasha, Hahav Yisrael, Victor, Ta'ima, Vakol, Tequila, Hagul, Mitzvah, Hakasha, Imakudas, Ha'aktush, Lamama, Hawks. And there it says, therefore, the Ahavas Yisrael that we are showing right now should not be with the mindset that it's here to do a tikkun or fix up. You know, you hear this a lot of times. Well, we had baseless hatred, so we have to fix that up with baseless love. So the Rebbe is saying, no. The basis love, the basis hatred is already fixed. All the causes of the galus are over. There's nothing else that we can possibly say that needs to be fixed. We should have a Ahavas Yisrael, but not to fix up anything. Instead, to focus on the future to come, when it's going to be revealed. And the whole idea is that we're all going to return to have true love of one of another. So we should do that now as a preparation for the future to come, not as a fixing up of the past. The Rebbe is taking us out of this past and bring us to the future. And this is because the level of our Yechida will be revealed. The fifth level of our soul, where we're all equal. And we all have a spark of the soul of Mashiach, who is the general fifth level of the soul, called the Yechida Klalit. And this is the whole concept of bringing them close to the Torah. And this is to bring them close, to teach them the Torah that will be the Torah that will take place in the future to come. Torah Chadash Amitzi Teitzi. The new Torah that will come out from me, which this is the preparation tool that we're doing every Monday nights. Okay, I'm going to skip the Dalit. Whatever, just not exactly on point with what we're talking right now. Tesvav. We're going to finish up with Hashem. Not that I don't love learning with everyone, but I do have a lot to do still this evening. So we're almost done. Early evening. Tesvav. Amor le'el kashor gam le'inin noisef b'hazman gamor. V'noga d'aricha misyayma v'tishayim. The Rebbe says, and according to what we said above, connecting to the fact that we've already completed the connection to all the times of the 9 days that we're in. Noisef al-klaus ha'minhat. Arichas v'suyayim v'tishayim gedei v'charvois v'simcha shel Torah. It's a custom on these 9 days to do a siyum every single day to emphasize the joy of the Torah. Simcha the Gemara shel Torah. The ultimate joy comes from learning Torah. The Gmasai v'siyayim v'sektas. Zina tzeruva mor. Rabban, the Shalim, the Sekras, Avidina, Yoima, Teva, the Rabbanon, Klogam, Hispa, Tzedakah. Also including, we have to add on Tzedakah. Because the Gula, Tzedakah brings charity, brings close to redemption. Yesh Hishdada, Biyumachad, Bishana Zu, Ba'arichas, Siyami, Berev Im, Adaras Hamelch. And this is specifically connected to the time that we're in now, which is it should be in a way of abundance that are honoring the king. Echad Rabim Yisrael, the Simcha, the Gemara Shal Torah, and the Siyum should all be all the Jewish people together, and ultimate Simcha. Klal Gam HaKatanim, also the young, Shadein Eno Shaychim LaHabar Masaga, that still don't even understand the Torah, they should still be at the Siyum. All direct with Dugmas Siyum, the Erev Pesach, Minhag Yisrael, Ave Gam, the Chorim, Akatayim, even like we say on Erev Pesach, we bring all the young together. The Ir, Shesiyoim, the Erev Pesach, Na'enu Dugma, B'mala, Ba'alma, Elishar Gam, Siyoima, Tishavayimi, Chasiyum, the Erev Pesach, Hu Hakana Laguda Pesach. Just like Erev Pesach, we said is a preparation for the redemption of Pesach. Yisrael Matisha Yamim, Hey, Kana Laguda Sita. And the siyum that we do during the 9 days are a preparation for the future redemption. Just like when I took you out of Egypt, I will once again show you wonders. But this is emphasized even more in our year. The year where I will show you wonders. As we're standing right now on the threshold of redemption. Tezayim. Yiratzon, may be God's will. Shedibor v'hachlatos, toivas kanal, yumaharu, v'yahaziru, v'yavu, b'fol, v'gilui, mamash, es, geula, shlisha, besamir, shlisha. The Rebbe says, just by taking good resolutions upon ourselves, based on everything we said earlier, this alone will bring forth immediately the true and complete redemption. V'pashtus. Shenoisef l'chach shekavar shiyoimei kol pratim abeis ha'amasuot b'midbar ha'amim shebezman hagos. That we have already completed all the 42 journeys throughout the desert in the times of this galus. Bamdim kavar al yirecha Yordan. We're already standing, literally crossing over into Eretz Yisrael. Oivrim as hayardim ma'arav u'knisim the Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Yisrael atzma halucha ma'arav. Yerushalayim Kodesh. And once we travel into Israel, we're going to go to the holy city of Yerushalayim. The Beit HaMikdash Shlishi, the third temple. The Kodesh Kadeshim, into the Holy of Holies. Where we find the Aron and the Luchos. Hakitza, Viranano, Shochna, Shochni Af. And all the dead will rise up from the dust and dance. It's going to be a nice sight, huh? Moshe v'Haroin Emehem, and Moshe and Aaron will be amongst them. And all the tzaddikim and all the leaders of the Jewish people. It says the righteous will stand up first. The Kari Kadoshim Abrahami Nasi the Reino Emehem and the Frierdiker Rebbe with them. Yichadin the Shamos Gufim the Kol Bnei Yisrael with the Reino Zeh, and including together all of us in this generation, souls in bodies. The Rebbe always emphasizes this because in other places there's mafarshim that explain that before Mashiach comes, people are going to have to die, that their souls are going to have to go out of their bodies. Some say from a very short period of time. There's all these different opinions. The Rebbe says no, that we're going to be able to go immediately without any hefsek, souls and bodies, physically to the true and complete redemption. Our young and our old, our sons and our daughters. And all together we'll learn the new Torah that comes out from God. All call Yisrael. We will hear Moshe speak to all of us. Excuse me. And the main thing is that this should all happen immediately, right now. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek, yechi adonenu morenu v'rabbeinu melech HaMashiach Nevuah. My holy brothers and sisters, Hashem should strengthen each and every one of you. He should strengthen all of us in these final moments of exile to pour forth whatever powers we have to do everything in our means to add in deeds of goodness and kindness, to encourage others to learn about Torah of Mashiach, about Mashiach and Geula. And surely, from all these wonderful resolutions and all this wonderful Torah learning we're doing, Mashiach will reveal himself right now. See you in the Beis HaMikdash. God bless you.